All right, everybody, welcome back to The Glass Less Traveled. My name is Mike Verivi. I am a certified bourbon steward and founder of the Fox Valley Whiskey Society. We're going to explore and introduce you to craft distilleries, microbreweries, industry insiders, and professional imbibers to give you the inside scoop on the things you need to be drinking. If you guys like what you're watching, don't forget to click like and subscribe. You can also help us expand by visiting us on Patreon at patreon.com/theglasslesstraveled. This is our YouTube series, but you can also listen to us via podcast, however you listen to podcasts. Tonight, I am joined by the wonderful Miss Avalon Oona, sales rep and meatball aficionado at Catoctin Creek Distillery in Purcellville, Virginia. Avalon, how are you tonight?
I'm wonderful. I just got over happy hour because I didn't realize how late it was going to be.
I have yet to pour myself anything, so my glass is empty.
And
we'll try to get some people to send you some meatballs. So for those of us who are maybe unfamiliar with Catoctin Creek, so I have my bottle right here. Tell us, take us back to the beginning. What's the genesis of Catoctin Creek Distillery?
So Scott and Becky are the founders. It's a really fun story that I love telling, especially when it comes to like doing tastings at liquor stores. So Becky is a chemical engineer and Scott is a tech guy. And they decided to take a trip about like 11 years ago to Scotland because Scott loved whiskey, just hated his job. And he's like, let's just like get away and like go to a place that makes amazing whiskey. So they went there, and after touring a bunch of distilleries and having, a couple of drinks, Scott was like, wait a minute. Like, I love whiskey. I hate my job. You're scientists. We can totally do this. Like, you're a chemical engineer. Like, we can open up a distillery. So they flew back. He did some research. He's like, yeah, we can definitely do this. And Becky's whole thing was like, well, I can. Just make sure we make money. He's like, that's my job. So now, like, 10 years later, we are now the most awarded whiskey distillery in Virginia, and also the most awarded whiskey in Virginia. We have over 100 awards that we've accumulated in the past 10, 11 years. And good balance. They've been together for a long time. They got 2 kids, one of which actually works for the company. As he works the Texas market. And then their son, Luke, is a fashion designer, and he is home now because of COVID, I assume.
Yeah.
I was up here at the distillery, so like I didn't know like a lot of the background of people beforehand before COVID. But yeah, so like they decided to do rye because George Washington being out of Virginia, like Mount Vernon, rye was the grain of choice. And 100% rye. So that's what we do is 100% rye, all organic, kosher, and sustainable rye. We source the rye out of 2 farms out of Virginia and 1 out of Pennsylvania. So we keep it as regionally local. So think about like, horse and buggy. You're George Washington. You're not going to go to like California, like wherever else there might be rye. You're going to be able to like get to it in like within a day or week trip. So we try to do the same thing with ours. Yeah.
So Virginia is the birthplace of American whiskey, and Catoctin Creek Distillery is the first legal distillery in the county in which it resides since before Prohibition. Certainly there is lots of history that Catoctin Creek is able to draw from. And it does this partly by producing Virginia's most awarded whiskey, Roundstone Rye. Tell us about this award-winning whiskey. What goes into making it? Where we can find it?
So we are in any. We've expanded a lot. In Chicago, we're in Binny's. We're in all the Total Wines, along with Costco's that can distribute the whiskey, but we're in 26 states and about 6 countries. I would say Europe, but then I realized it was like Mexico isn't in Europe, so we're also in Mexico. But yeah, 6 other countries. So the Roundstone, the reason why it's called Roundstone is when Scott like had his epiphany, aha moment that he wants to, open up a distillery. It was in Roundstone, Ireland. So that's why that's the homage to it. People ask. As for Catoctin itself, if you're not familiar with Purcellville, there's the Catoctin Creek that basically splits up between, it's a runoff of the Potomac River. Potomac is between Virginia and Maryland, and it comes into Virginia. There's also like a Maryland Potomac, but that's kind of like another spur off. But Catoctin itself, which most people don't know how to pronounce, which is fine. If you go to our website, we literally have like a little bar. It says pronunciation. And one of our former brand ambassadors is like sitting there, like in like a smoking.
Hilarious, by the way. Hilarious.
Did you watch it?
I did. I watched the whole thing.
He's like, Catoctin. And then goes through all the bastardizations that it was like catechin, catocin, comatose. I'm like, you're comatose, you're not like there's no M in Catoctin. But it's a Native American term that means a plethora of deer. Because when the Native Americans were here, even though it's kind of split between Virginia and Maryland, that was their territory. There was no Virginia or Maryland beforehand. And if you've ever been down here, there's a lot of deer. There's a lot of deer. I thankfully, knock on wood, have never hit one, but that's something you got to watch out for when you're driving around here.
I did. We were driving to North Carolina, 4-hour wedding, and I hit a dead deer in the middle of the road just outside of Toledo, Ohio. I left my bumper there. The deer I left obviously there. It was already dead. I just, wanted to make sure.
You just wanted like one last little
one last little, yep, just make sure like, all right, it's good, it's dead. And then I just kept going. I want to remind everybody that's watching, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to comment, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. We'll put them up on the screen and Avalon can answer the questions for you. We can't talk about Catoctin Creek without mentioning founder, chief distiller, and co-owner of Catoctin Creek, Becky Harris. Becky was recently appointed the American Craft Spirits Association president of the board of directors. As head of the ACSA COVID-19 task force, Becky has been instrumental in helping build and implement sanitizer best practices. By working with the EPA, FDA to understand and streamline bureaucracy, she's been able to swiftly educate distillers across the nation while making sure her own distillery team stays compliant and safe. What has it been like at the distillery, distilling hand sanitizer for the community, and what was the response of Catoctin Creek and its employees when the call was made to service the first responders by supplying hand sanitizer?
So that was so as a salesperson who is normally covering DC, Maryland, Delaware, being out in the field, going to bars, doing all that stuff, as soon as everything got shut down, Scott called me and our Virginia rep, John, and they're like, we're not going to be out in the field. Like, it's a little insensitive to be like, hey, things get shut down. You want to buy stuff? You're going to come into the distillery. So we're like, okay. So we came in here and like, all I remember is like Becky just like being on her computer all the time and on phone calls. And like, I didn't really connect what was going on. And then like week 2, maybe even at the end of week 1, as we like came in, we're like, we're just gonna like come in and like pretend we know what we're doing. Like my experience at the distillery was like, I would come in, pick up samples, and say hi to people. I barely knew half the people's names, but I knew their faces. And I'm like, hey guys, I'm just gonna get this, and I'm gonna go back into my territory. And that was it. So during the whole sanitizer thing, like learning about it was a little scary because like you have like explosive materials 10 feet away from you. And after we learned about it beforehand, we were all just like in high alert, as you should be. Right. But what actually happened, we're like, okay, like we didn't distill anything. We had our like the heads and tails that we put together to make sanitizer initially. And once we were out of that, that's when Becky contacted the FDA and like tried to figure out like, okay, what do we need to do to help the cause? So we got all the materials and we did it for like, I don't know. It's like a blur. It was a long time. It was a good time too, because initially it was like John and I, and that's where we're at now. It's just John and I, but we brought on the majority of the tasting room. And it's important to note that like they didn't lay anybody off at Catoctin. The only people that like weren't here were people that already had like full-time jobs and they are here like on their off time. Right. So they weren't really losing any money, just kind of like a little extra like pocket cash. That was it. But we brought in, I don't know, another like 4 or 5 other people to come to do the sanitizer stuff. And we had a really good time. It was like, we were very silly. We all like, were like, Scott and Becky did a great job of bringing together just like-minded people. Everybody got along immediately because, like I said, I didn't know them. And like we had inside jokes like the first day. Like we're all sitting around each other. We all reverted into our like 14-year-old like boys, just, like dirty jokes and just like talking, just all that. It was a good time. people just like singing out in karaoke, rapping, just like as we're like doing like pour. And the sanitation, it wasn't like a big process. We had a vat, and where you put your iced tea, and just like like that. We put it all in there. It was all sanitized because sanitizer. Put it in a bottle, close it, cork it, put it away. That was our entire day.
I follow you guys. Obviously, you and I are friends on Facebook, and I follow Catoctin Creek on both Instagram and Facebook. Every time you post something, it's always about the distillery. It's always like, this is what we did today, especially during the big outbreak where every distillery and brewery, it seemed like was making.
Facebook actually reported me.
Really?
Yeah, they almost blocked my Facebook because I posted about sanitizer, and because I might have like hashtag like glycerin. They're like, it's a bomb.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, like you were blocking my post. I'm trying to tell the people. What? It was fine. Like I'm still able to post, but we were able to, you had mentioned so we were able to donate to nursing homes, to police departments, to firefighters, to any first responder, obviously like hospital, like everyone. And we had such an amazing support. So rabble rouser, which is we're going to talk about later, but we get a huge line for rabble, huge. And our sanitizer, when we released it to the public, because at first, like the first couple of weeks, it was only for first responders.
Sure.
Like it was primarily for them because we wanted them to be safe and them to be healthy. We actually had a woman who worked at a nursing home, and this was like right at the cusp of it. And she came in like in tears because they had nothing. They had no sanitizer. There was a shortage of gloves. Like it makes me want to cry right now. Like they had nothing. And Scott was just like, just take it. Like, this is for you. Be safe. And she like wanted to like hug him, but she like stopped herself. And she's like, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And like, it's a really great company. Like we didn't do it necessarily we didn't do it for the money. Like obviously we made a profit at some point, but like we wanted to make sure to take care of the community because that's what we do.
Sure.
And like being sustainable, we also want to give back. We were the first, one of the first companies in Purcellville to really think about like the bigger picture of our community of like, okay, our spent mash, donate it to the local farmers for free. We're just going to toss it anyway. Like might as well give it to them. So we have people who come up almost every day to get our spent mash just to feed their cows. Yeah. And we have the largest solar panel installation in Loudoun County on our roof. Like right up there. Yeah. And it, sometimes like on really sunny days, we end up like saving, like getting so much energy, we sell it back to Dominion and they just disperse it.
Yeah. Super, super cool that you guys are that involved with the community that, that obviously supports you guys, between the solar power and being renewable and, donating everything, especially, for a little old lady to come in and
it was
she doesn't have anything,
happy, sad, you're just like, be healthy. Hope everything's okay.
Take this, please. Both Becky and Scott have an affinity for distilled spirits, and Scott is a big fan of a German bitters called Boonecamp. For those of you who don't know, it's kind of like it's like a digestive, they call it, which
like
which some of you guys watching might be pretty familiar with. Has this love for the science, the art, and the process of distilling carried over into the workplace with the employees at Catoctin Creek?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, fun fact, I didn't know that he liked it until I saw this. I was like, oh, I talked to him today. He's like, yeah, because I mean, he's a German military brat. And I was like, I talk to him all the time, but it's not something that necessarily comes up in conversation. I was like, I learned something on the interview about the company I work for.
I do a lot of research. So you and I talked about this, I think maybe 2 weeks in advance. And my wife she's, for those of you who watch regularly, she's on the other side of this computer. And she's always like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm, reading websites and scrolling through social media and going through every article that I can possibly find. But I learned that about Scott. So that was pretty interesting.
He made a reference. He's like, oh yeah. He's like, this guy did his research. Like he skimmed every point with any information.
Every damn word of that website.
But the question definitely, it's It's carried over immensely, and like I've always been like spirits have been like my home. So I've worked in wine, I've worked in beer, I've worked in tobacco. I basically hit every vice outside of like weed at this point because it just became decriminalized in Virginia. So we might be doing something with some marijuana. Who knows? But like it is definitely carried over to everybody. Like if you talk to anybody here at the distillery, we're all super nerds. Like we want to know all the things out, even like obviously with rye and like our gin, our brandy and all that stuff, but like anything. Like we want to hear like, oh, like how do you distill this? How do you what? Yeah, you want to talk about it? Like let's geek out. Let's have like it is carried over immensely. Like I said, Becky's obviously a chemical engineer, so like Becky naturally to her, and she is a boss. Like I honestly like in reference to like sanitation, even now, like I remember she was like, I might be up for like the president, but like I don't. Yeah. Like, how do you get all this done? Do you sleep?
Wonder Woman.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
But no, like she seriously is the real life like Wonder Woman. Like I think she sleeps. She looks great every day. So like, there's no like.
When you guys come in, like when somebody first starts there, like when you first started with Catoctin Creek, and this is we want to talk about doing research. I want to say it was January of 2019, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Super hardcore into research. When you started in January of 2019, was it kind of like, all right, we're going to take you under our wing. This is how you distill. This is how you do this. This is how you do this. I'd have to imagine that kind of helps with the sales process of actually going to these different locations saying, this is the product that we make. This is how it's distilled. These are the people. Is there a learning curve there, or is it just kind of like these guys are so passionate about it, they make it like, oh, I got it. I get it.
It's so like, okay. So John and I, so we have 4 reps in the entire nation, one of which is their son who didn't need a course because he grew up in it. John actually so me and John are kind of like a special case. So like John was a fanboy, like the biggest fanboy. Like anytime there was like a workshop or whatever, like he was here and like they would see him all the time. And he was like a wine rep and like he had already had like restaurant and spirits and all that stuff. And once a position opened up for Virginia, they're like, so we might want to like have you do, so they didn't need to explain anything to him. Because he already like knew from the beginning. He had worked at the tasting room before he actually got into sales. I had already sold Catoctin. The distillate and like, so I had a good background. I basically just like read their tasting notes. I know how the distillation process works. Mm-hmm. I knew that because my girlfriend Lauren knew like my background. She's like, yeah, she's got it. It's fine. As for like learning how we distill, that actually came out like actually like hands-on, like walking through, because Scott would like give me the tour and he explained to me on how everything worked. But the actual like nitty-gritty of it didn't really happen until I started working at the distillery. Mm-hmm. So when I, as a salesperson, because I already had some background, it was kind of, he's like, I trust you, do you? And just like put me out in the field. And I'd already worked DC, Maryland and Delaware were very new. I had not done anything with it outside of like going to Baltimore with my parents to go to Fells Point and drink a bunch. And then to like Frederick, Maryland, where I'm actually going tomorrow, just because it's really pretty. And there's a bunch of like restaurants and stuff to like bounce around. So like those were like new things, but I've been a rep for like 9 years. So I started like fresh 21. Like I became wine rep at 21 and then worked my way up. So they were just like, yeah.
Do you?
I ended up opening up like 300 accounts last year. And in my first year, between DC, Maryland, and Delaware. So, yeah, I didn't have anything else to do. So I was like,
just sell whiskey and eat meatballs, whatever.
Travel around and just like go and do that.
If anybody has any questions, again, please feel free to comment, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook. Please feel free to comment if you guys have any questions for Avalon or myself. Catoctin Creek stays very true to its Virginian roots by distilling and producing primarily rye whiskey, along with an occasional malt whiskey released for special events and occasions. In addition, Catoctin Creek also distills gin and brandy. This decision to not produce bourbon has historically been found to be the case with early settlers of Virginia, Pennsylvania, and even Kentucky. Rye was most commonly used grain for whiskey production at the time, and for a short time, rye whiskey was more popular than bourbon in, of all places, Kentucky. Has the decision to forego the production of bourbon been an intentional one, or does Catoctin Creek have plans to distill a bourbon in the future?
No.
No. Never.
Their whole thing is like it was so rye, in case this wasn't like apparent, was America's first whiskey. As much as, Kentucky would like us to think it was bourbon, it's not. It was rye. It was based out of Virginia, and because we're out of Virginia, even with our brandies, brandy was also well known in Virginia. So we try to stay as true as we can to the Virginia heritage. And, to quote Scott, is like, we want to do one thing and do it right.
Sure.
Like that, we have our concept and that's what we want to do. My other, like, if you want to think, financially, like, why would we bring in corn if we're trying to be sustainable? If we're going to use it for one thing, we can use rye across the board, including our gin. Our gin is actually made from rye. Mm-hmm. So for those of you out there who don't know, that when you're distilling, you have the heads, the hearts, and the tails. So head, heart, tails, feet. The heads you can't drink. That's the stuff that'll make you go blind. So that's what we use for our sanitizer. The hearts are the good stuff. That's the heart of the soul that you want to keep. And that's what we put into the barrels. And then the tails, you can drink them. They just don't taste all that great. It's kind of like it's like an old dirty sock initially. So what we do is we redistill it 3 times, taking out all those off flavors, all those oils that give it that like funky flavor, and leaving a neutral spirit. And once we get enough of that, we take it and then we add our botanicals in there. So obviously juniper, coriander, cardamom, anise, and cinnamon. Orange peel as well. Oh my God, that's one of my since I've actually did it.
This will be on the test later.
And so we let those sit for about 24 hours, like literally in like a bag, like it's sterilized, but it's like pillows, like pillowcases. We literally put them in like pillowcases and sit them, like the gin at that point is like at 116 proof, like it's fine. So let them sit for 24 hours, take them out. And the whole point of our gin is Becky and Scott are big gin drinkers. So they wanted to kind of create like a gateway gin, like think more like botanically flavored vodka versus like a London dry gin where it's like, boom, Christmas tree to the face. I love that, but I love all kinds of gin. So ours is a little bit more floral, a little bit more feminine. Like you don't get, those really aggressive flavors. It's very subtle and easy drinking. Like you can sip on it without having to mix it. And that was the whole point of like their version of the gin. As for the brandies, so we have an apple and our peach.
And you guys actually have a new one, the 1757
XO.
That was I think it was just announced today. Is that a 7-year? Or is it a 4-year because it's a bottled in bond? Oh my God, do I know more?
Like we literally released it today and I was like busy.
I know it's a bottled in bond release. We'll get to Brandy in a little bit. Have you seen? It's interesting when we talk about rye. We talked with Union Horse Distilling, our good friend. Oh my God, our good friend Wilson over at Union Horse Distilling. They have a phenomenal rye. It's interesting to see these distilleries that are kind of coming into rye that were distilling bourbon and then they kind of moved into rye. One of the key factors the whiskey community believes for rye's eventual rise in popularity was a dapper son of a bitch named Don Draper from Mad Men, and he used rye in his old fashions. Do you find this to be that kind of like social aspect or that media aspect of like, oh, I see it's becoming popular now, or my favorite TV character is drinking it. Do you guys kind of see that to be true in the rye world?
So it was fun. The reason why I was like smirking so hard when you brought that up is because Scott, literally, when I told him about this podcast, he's like, yeah, he's like, and the fact that like, who did he reference? Wasn't Beam? Might have been Woodford. Who was one of the first? I think it was Beam. One of like the big guys. Like, we're going to start making rye now. And Scott's like, yeah, we started making rye. And then all of a sudden, every like big distillery that's ever been was like, we're going to start making rye too. We're making rye. And we're like, what? Why?
We've been doing this
to like get onto the trend. And I like when I was working for Southern and selling Catoctin, like my biggest thing when it came to rye, like and selling Catoctin, I was like, okay, you're a bourbon drinker. That's great. Nothing wrong with that. I like bourbon too. But Catoctin, everybody had like this bad like taste in their mouths, almost literally sometimes, about rye because they thought it was too spicy, or it was like that black pepper. It was too hot. That was the thing. They would mix up the spice of the rye and think it was the heat of it.
Right.
They're like, oh, it's too high proof. Like it's not. I'm like, no, like that's the spiciness of it. And the amazing thing about Catoctin, it's 100% rye. There's no corn whatsoever in there, and you still get a sweetness to it.
Yes. Like
you get a nice, almost like bourbon drinker's rye.
First thing that I noticed, this is a bourbon drinker's rye. So I've had a lot of different bourbons. I've had a lot of different ryes. And when the first thing I do is when I open a bottle is I just bury my nose in the bottle and I just, take one big waft. I've gotten so used to it now that like, yeah, it burns a little bit, but whatever. And then I put it, every time.
Or they just grew back like immensely.
Yeah, my nose hairs just kind of eventually grew back. Actually, they just grew back into a mustache.
There you go. You're a true whiskey drinker now.
Exactly. It's all here. So the first thing I do is I pour it into my Glencairn glass and I let it sit for a little bit. And the first thing I said to myself was, this is a bourbon drinker's rye. This is not pepper. I mean, it's very, very faintly peppery, but it's really kind of sweet with like these beautiful floral notes, and it's very fruity and it's just very mild. And I went out and I got the 2015 gold medal winner. I got the 92 proof round stone rye.
94 in the Wine Enthusiast now as of last year.
Really? You guys are just racking in awards.
We're just getting it.
I know. What is it though? I mean, I'm kind of curious, and I'm sure a lot of people. And here's Dan Greyson, the EXO. I was right the first time.
Okay, yeah.
I was right the first time. 7 years old. So what is it about the distilling process that makes Catoctin Creek so kind of sweet and fruity and floral versus, something like maybe like a Pinhook where it's just very peppery and it has that bite and it just kind of bites you on the tongue? Is it the distillation process? What can you tell us about
quality of the rye?
Quality of the rye. I also want to talk about I want to talk about Ron Swanson. I want to talk about Ron Swanson. Why name one of your stills Ron Swanson?
He's a big burly dude he's our biggest still that we have, and he loves his whiskey. And that's our whiskey still. We have one other one. There might be some Ron Swanson 2.0 in the future just because of how much we've grown. So it's still going to keep the name, but it'll be a 2.0. Our other one is named Barney, and we can come back to Barney once we talk about the brandies.
Yes.
There's a reason why.
Which actually is our next topic. Again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free. And Dan mentioned again, it was distilled in 2013. Very, very curious about that brandy, so I'm gonna have to go find a bottle.
Thank you, Dan. It's my second happy hour. Like it's one thing. Like it's already had like that has a following on its own, and I actually haven't been able to like learn about it. It's delicious.
Brandy production is another aspect of Catoctin Creek that pays homage to Virginia's distilling history. Brandy was, for a long time, more popular even than rye in the region, and was famously distilled by George Washington at his Mount Vernon estate, along with rye. Talk to us about the brandies at Catoctin Creek and what varieties we can find. You kind of dabbled in it a little bit.
So our main one is our 1757. So this pays homage to Loudoun County being established in 1757. So this is a collaboration of several wineries in the area. So again, we like to collaborate with our community and just try and like give back. So all of our rye and everything that we distill, as in like our whiskey and gin, in-house. We obviously distill this in-house as well, but we don't get the wine. We don't make the wine. Sure. We get it from our wineries in Virginia. It's mainly Chamberson, and then there's a blend of other ones in there. And the reason why we don't work with like one or two different wineries is because if you know anything about wine, your yield one year will be very different from the yield the next year. So if you rely on one, it's going to really just like, it's going to change a lot. So we try to keep it as consistent as possible. So try to work with as many different wineries as possible. So our brandy is, every time I taste it, it makes me really mad that nobody drinks American brandy. Like, or hardly anybody. They do in Wisconsin.
They do in Wisconsin a lot.
Yeah. In fact, that's where Becky's from.
Oh, really? Oh, go figure.
Yeah. Our brandy is super smooth, super flavorful. Like, there's no reason, like, no judgment to anybody who drinks, Cavassier or Hennessy. Like, do you? They're great, cognacs, which is a version of brandy. But American brandy is a thing, and it's delicious, especially our brandy, which I want to sip on right now real quick.
Are you finding, we talked with Alan Bishop and Jolie Kasperzak over at Spirits of French Lick in southern Indiana a few weeks ago, and they have an apple brandy that they make. We're starting to see that brandy is kind of like growing in popularity. There you go. Have you guys seen like this rise in brandy consumption, or is it still kind of teetering off?
It's steady. Like, people are, the sales that we get with brandy are more experimental and inquisitive. They're like, never had it before. I'm really interested. So we do our apple. We have, like I said, our peach, and then peach, and then our pear brandy. And they all come from local orchards. And essentially what they do is they send us their cider, and then we distill that down into a spirit and then age it for about 2 years or so in our used whiskey barrels. So they're really light. So if you've ever ate, what is it? Like Irish whiskey.
Yeah.
It's really light in color.
Yeah.
Because they come from used barrels. So you're not going to get like a really dark a color in the fruited brandies, because we use the used barrels.
Sure.
And so they're really light. It's more of a German style brandy. So there's no sweetener added. Like, I found like a lot of people, especially when I do tastings, like at liquor stores, they taste their brandy and they're like, oh, it's not sweet. I'm like, it's not schnapps. Like, that's what most people think. And like, it's like, going to your grandmother's, cupboard and like finding like, her really sweet, like lower proof,
Yeah, like when you're 15 years old, because I've never done that.
Yeah. I don't even know how I even made that reference. It's crazy. But ours it's very true. It's not sweet. It's very light. Our pear brandy is probably the most popular. But if you were like, if even any song was to taste it like blind, they wouldn't know that it was pear.
Really?
Like, it's that light. There's like, it's fruit. I'm not quite sure what kind of fruit, but it tastes like fruit. Like, the apple's very crisp. Like, you taste the apple. And again, all out of Virginia cideries. So even like the pear comes straight out of Fabioli Winery. Whoop, there we go. Out of oh god, is that Lovettsville? Ooh, Fabioli. It's been a minute of it. It's like, like 15 minutes from here. It's not far at all.
So nice and close.
The most like flavorful of like the one is the
peach.
The peach. Which, you ever bit into a peach, you get all that juice, right? Like, it's, that you're eating a peach. And that's my favorite, personally. I love the peach brandy.
That one sounds really good. I like anything peach flavored, so I'm going to have to look into that one.
Dan was asking like what my favorite cocktail.
Yeah.
Well, if you ask Denise, who's our tasting room manager, she would say the 92 proof neat. That's her favorite cocktail. I mean, I'm definitely with her. Like, I like my spirit. I've been in this industry for so long, and as much as I love cocktails, I love spirits, and I like for the spirit to speak. So just like a really well done old fashioned like gets me every time. Even if it's just like one with like a little twist where like you use a different type of bitters or like you use a different type of simple, substitute it with like maple syrup, like whatever, like something that just really well balanced that like allows the whiskey to speak. Any old fashioned or Manhattan with a 92 is money as far as I'm concerned. Like that's where you
agree. I agree. I think for me, it's, you know, the simpler, the better. You know, you don't have to have this, you know, crazy, you know, mixologist make everything for you.
If you have a good spirit, you want it to pull through. Like part of the reason for like the whole like prohibition style cocktails, like they had shit booze.
Yeah.
Can I say that? And so
that's fine, I do.
they didn't have like a high quality of spirit, so they needed to layer it to make it taste better. Like that's kind of like how, like not necessarily exactly, but like that's part of the reason why cocktails kind of came to be. They're like, oh, this isn't great. How do we make this better? We'll put some this in there, we'll put this in there. But if you have a good product and you're able to balance it with other ingredients, do it. Like once a year we come out with our pear brandy barrel aged gin so we basically take our pear brandy barrels and then put our gin into it and let it sit for about 2 years. And it's Old Tom style. So we add like a little, it's like 2% sugar, residual sugar. Mm-hmm. Delicious. I did, which I'm actually going to tomorrow in Frederick. Nola, Cafe Nola, Frederick, Maryland. Delicious. Great place. They did a cocktail. They did a cocktail and it was just the Old Tom gin and then Giffard, I think is that how you pronounce it? Giffard's banana liqueur. Mm-hmm. And then I can't remember the type of bitters they put on top, but like that was it. And we did a dinner, and that was everybody's favorite cocktail.
Where can we find? So Benny's carries the rye that you guys make. Do they also carry the brandy, or is that like a distillery only thing? I don't go to the brandy section at Benny's ever. I have really no reason to, so I don't know.
I don't know, only because so before COVID happened, like I was trying my best to be like the surrogate rep for Chicago because I did like a Benny's thing when Becky had to like go to California or something. I was like, I'll go. You want me to go? That's fine. So I only tasted our whiskey and our gin. I didn't taste the brandy. So that can only tell me that they might not have the brandy, but don't quote me on that.
We'll look into it.
Yeah.
We'll Google it.
So I don't know much. Like I again had my own territory, but I'm saying, you want me to go there? Send me away. I'm happy to go. Let me explore the rest of the United States. I'm happy to do it and speak the good word of Catoctin.
We already touched on the gin a little bit, and you basically told us everything we need to know. But I want to jump into one of the things that I'd mentioned when I advertised these live casts and these podcasts is there's always like kind of one thing that I mentioned that everybody's like, wait, they're going to talk about that. In May of 2019, Maxim Magazine wrote an article titled 10 Best Bottled and Bond Spirits and listed Catoctin Creek's Rabble Rouser Bottled and Bond Rye Whiskey. Talk to us about what sets Rabble Rouser apart from other rye selections you have, and also what Rabble Rouser means. Okay,
so Rabble Rouser was like the year that we got the award, so not only did we get that mention, but we also were Virginia's best whiskey. Not only the most awarded whiskey, but we got Virginia's best whiskey that year because of Rabble Rouser. So it's a 4-year bottled and bond. I don't know if you bonded basically means you need a warehouse that is bonded within a certain criteria. I think it's like 24 miles. 26. It's like 24 to 26 miles, like from the distillery. It needs to be close. You can't like have like your distillery in Kentucky and be like, it's not bottled and bond. And it's just a very select distillation process to where we just use like the best of the best, and then we age it. So, and then 4 years, Rabble Rouser has to do with, which is kind of prevalent to like now what's going on and with the protests and everything. It's a person who like rallies people together and like gets them all excited. So it just, it's just getting people excited. And they named it Rabble Rouser because versus, our Round Sun, which is our 80 proof, our 92, which is Distiller's Edition. I will reference why it's called Distilleries Edition later on if we have time. And then cask proof, which is at the 116 proof. They're all delicious on their own, but the rabble rouser like has like a different flavor, and it just kind of like excites and like rallies like your palate. And at 100 proof, it is some of the smoothest whiskey I've ever had.
Yeah,
I've had 2 versions so far. Working with Catoctin, and Scott like will keep it like in his little drawer in the back, like when he like at his desk, he's like, "Want to try some? Want to try some rabble rouser?" I'm like, "Yeah, I definitely do." Twist my arm.
Want to buy a watch?
And I was like, every time I try, I'm like, 100 proof? Really? Huh? Like I put this on my pancakes. Like it's delicious, and it's still got like that really nice spice and just like a lot of things going with it. Like I was joking with him today. Nobody knows John Shope, look up Johnny CCDC. He's a wild man. We get along great. We're both a little like feisty. And I was like, oh, it's like Rabble's like me and John. Like that's why we're salespeople. Like we're just like, we get people around us, like drink some Catoctin. And yeah, it's like a crazy bandanaed man and a pink-haired girl, like all in your mouth. That's
Is the rabble rouser, is that like a regular release, or is that release?
It comes out once a year.
Okay. Probably why I didn't see it on the shelf, because that's actually the one that I was looking for. It rallies people around it, and then they get it and they go and it's gone. Like when I had referenced rabble rouser, like with the sanitizer, I think we got off like we transitioned, but the line for sanitizer was longer than rabble rouser, and rabble is usually like around and up like several blocks of people waiting in line for it when it's released. And it's gone. When does that get released?
March, like it's around March-ish, like February, March. Things were a little funny during COVID.
So we're a little late.
Yeah, it's not going to be until next year. It's definitely not going to be until next year, which is really frustrating because like we bottled some the other day, and I'm like, oh, I got some. Like, can I get like a little bonus for like doing like, you know, all of the sanitizer and all that stuff? Can we just get like a complimentary bottle? No, okay.
No.
We just get to like smell it. I'm not gonna lie, we might have like snuck a little taste of it.
Who's gonna know?
Why wouldn't you?
Right, who's gonna know?
Right there.
I want to talk about some limited releases. So Dan Greyson, a good friend of mine, he actually helps operate the Fox Valley Whiskey Society with me, along with our buddy Steve. And Dan is a collector of sorts of fine whiskeys, and he sent me a picture. I talk to Dan every single day, and he sent me a picture the other day. I sent him a picture of the Catoctin Creek, and he sent me a picture of one of the limited releases. So I'm sure Dan will mention that. But the partnership between Catoctin Creek and the local breweries in the area is certainly an interesting one, turning, and I quote, beer to whiskey as part of an experimental series that gets released from time to time. Being a craft distillery, Catoctin Creek has the ability to have fun and experiment with distillation and create some things that become limited time offerings. Talk to us about some of the experimental releases Catoctin Creek has and what we might expect in the future.
So the most recent was, okay, so it all started with Detroit Theory, which is like maybe 5 minutes down the road. And they are a brewery that do a lot of like crazy different type of beers. But one of their main staples is their Dias de los Muertos, which my dad affectionately calls it the dead girl, because it's got a girl with a sugar skull on the label. And they have beautiful artwork on every single one of their beers. I think they work with like 4 or 5 different like artists around the world to do it. If you get your hands on a bottle, keep it, because it's going to be real pretty. But so for some reason, what was this, like 4 or 5 years ago? Something happened with the batch so it's a porter, and something happened with it. Like it wasn't like it wasn't infected or anything. Like it just wasn't right. And so being friends with Scott and Becky, they were like, hey, so can you do something with this? We don't want to toss it. And Becky was like, yeah. I mean, it's great. We can distill it. So they distilled it down into, white spirit, and then aged it for, was it 4 years? 4 years. And then released it, and people like lost their minds about it. And it was just from like a mistake. And there was like, oh, super cool. We've never had it before. So Dias was the first one that like they have now consistently done on purpose. And then after that success with it, they're like, let's pair up with some other local, breweries. So the last one was Beltway Brewing out of Virginia. And they did their Octomalt, which is an IPA, and then their Farmhouse Ale, which is Saison style beer, and took those and distilled it and then aged them again. And they were super cool, like very different. Like the Octomalt, think about if you've ever had a Bell's Two Hearted.
Yeah.
Think like a flat, high octane Bell's Two Hearted. It's like whiskey and Bell's in a glass.
Yeah.
Like my boys in DC, I have plenty of them. They're like, we can't carry it at the bar because I'll drink all the Bells. We gotta keep it in a can. Every dude who had tasted it was like, they got giddy like a schoolgirl, tasted it. It was hilarious. The Farmhouse was a little bit softer, a little bit more feminine, had more citrus notes in there, almost like a little Scotch-like, and also delicious. The next ones that we're looking to do, but they won't happen until 2020 or 2021. Yeah, 2021. We're doing Port City, which is another local brewery that I actually used to work with when I worked with my beer company. So I know a lot of those guys there. They're really good people. They have amazing beer. So they're doing the Colossal 10, which is, from what I remember, that is their triple. It's been a minute. Been out of the beer can for a while. I'm pretty sure that's one of their triples. It's something that they do, that they release, that comes out once a year, and they had enough to give us to make some. And then we're doing the Finch and Hawk, which is that's just a generic name to Virginia. It's all Virginia malt.
Very cool.
And yeah, that'll all be released in 2021.
Now, are these? So I know single cask. Is it single cask nation or single malt nation?
Wait, which one? What are whiskeys or?
I think it's an organization, and Dan is going to have to comment on this one, Dan Greyson, because he's actually the one that has the bottle. I want to say it's single cask nation. They're a group of people that kind of buy and barrel buy and bottle all these.
So, yeah, along with our things, we do private barrels, and they're not just for restaurants and bars. They are to the public. You've
done one with, I think, Wolfgang Puck.
Yeah,
correct?
We did with Wolfgang Puck about a year ago.
Oh, is that recent?
Yeah.
Now, are these releases? Are they only available to the people that, like Wolfgang Puck? Is it only available at his restaurants in Las Vegas, or can we find these at?
He's a DC location.
Oh, that's right. He does. Yeah.
Yeah, DC location. That's part of the reason why he reached out to us, because it was local and he wanted to, so he's got his own label and everything. For at the distillery, we don't have any of the private labels available. I know in Montgomery County, they just got they have a port barrel finish, and then a really cool one. We got a Lafroig barrel.
Oh,
yeah, I know. Yeah. I bottled it. I was like, this smells like straight up pee, in my face. It just wafted. I was like, iodine. Whew. All right. It was really weird because I did pour myself some. And it was really scotchy up front, but then it mellowed out as this nice sweetness on the back end. Cause Chess asked me as you want. I'm not a big I lay Scotch fan. I can't do Lafroig or even Lagavulin, it's too much for me. I can appreciate it, but I'm not going to be drinking a bunch of it with a cigar. I can't. I'm I can taste it. This is. I did have a chance at one point to try was it 25 or 30 year Lafroig at some convention, as a sampling with the dudes in kilts.
Yeah.
And I remember it was when I was trying to work with Southern. I was kind of the herding of cats person, as we were the rep was okay, bartenders, let's go this way. Got into a room and the one dude was no, I can't drink it, about to pour it out. I was I'm not a Scotch person, but you do not pour that out. I was you give this to mama and I will drink.
So Dan mentioned he kind of gave us he's super knowledgeable, by the way. He's actually going to be on an episode with us. He's kind of we'll call him a future co-host of the show. We do tastings and stuff like that. But he's one of my good friends. I've known him for I don't know. I'd actually say about a year now. He helped me form the Fox Valley Whiskey Society. So he's got the 2015 bottle, 3-year in white wine barrels, 124.8 proof. Do you guys do these limited release offerings pretty often, or is it just like if somebody approaches you for something, it's like, oh yeah, we'll do one?
Oh, that's from the single cask nation.
That's from the single cask nation, yeah.
I mean, they're available all over. Like we've had people to do them, like they have a company. Like, let's do something that's like team building and like buy a barrel and like keep it in like our like office bar. Like for those of us who are lucky enough who work in an office and have a bar, they'll just like buy a barrel and do it. So I personally, like I've sold most of it into like restaurants and to liquor stores. I haven't had like a lot of people like reach out to me necessarily of like doing their own private for like their family or like their company. But if you want to buy a barrel, like we'll sell it to you.
What's the smallest barrel size that you guys use?
30.
30 gallons is the smallest.
And it's kind of like, I just learned this recently, that the reason why we picked 30, because Becky's doing all the distilling and like so I'm 5'10" and so is Becky. We're about the same, build. She might be a little bit, more petite than I am, but she's a strong girl. And so she's like, I just want a barrel that like I can pick up myself. And so like a 30-gallon empty barrel, even full, she's like, I want to be able to like move it around. And like that's part of the reason why they picked that. And so all of our wood or all of our barrels come from essentially Minnesota and Virginia.
Okay.
So we try to keep it like regionally, local to the area. And part of the reason why we do Minnesota is because it's a cold climate. Right. So wood is really dense. So it locks into a lot of flavor. And we normally keep to about a number 3 char on the barrels.
Okay. For those of you who are wondering, because I know there's a lot of like whiskey nerds out there that are going to wonder, like, what do they char their barrels to?
The 92, actually, they're slowly transitioning into doing just Virginia oak. Okay. And we found out, like, working in the distillery, how they were picked. It's like, oh, there's like maybe, with 1 out of 10 barrel becomes a 92 proof. But actually, like, they have like an array of barrels that they taste from. And they're like, which one speaks true to the 92? And we got to taste through. And not to toot my own horn, but I was pretty on point with Becky every time. She has several tastes. And she's like, no, that one, we'll see.
In 2017, Paul Pacalt's Spirit Journal, which was the best of the best issue, Catoctin Creek's Roundstone Rye cask proof was given the highest recommendation, and it was said by Paul, do what you have to do to buy a bottle or two. The following year, in 2017, it won double gold at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. Talk to us about this cask-proof rye and why it's so special and why it's killing all these awards.
It's 116 proof. So it's you would think it's hotter than it actually is, but it's still very smooth. The cask proof, like again, it's similar to the Distiller's Edition in the sense that like, so mind you, if you don't know, all of our whiskeys are made from all the same mash bill. It's all the same, all 100% rye. So it starts out all the same, and then we age it, and then we take them to figure out like, where do we want it to go? Which one's sweeter? Because when you're aging it, different, temperatures and where it's sitting, it's going to, react differently. One might be a little leakier than the other one. One might, do this. So the cask proof is also selected very similar to the 92, to where just like, okay, we want that like a nice, spicy, robust, but also very smooth. Like you want to be able to like drink it like literally out of a glass without having to add any water and be like, that doesn't hurt me. This makes me feel really nice, actually. But you still get that nice spice with like a little bit of sweetness. And the spice that you get with Catoctin, and what I found across the board, is never that like black pepper spice. It's more of like that cinnamon spice. Very like, it's so spicy, but it's not going to like, you're not going to like sneeze after like drinking it. You're not going to like, be offended by it. And it never kicks you back here. That's always like the main thing, especially with the cask proof. Like if it kicks you back here, you're like, no, we did something wrong. Like we want it to be like enjoyable all the way through. It might be a little hot because it is 116 proof, but it's still enjoyable.
Right.
But like I think that's the coolest thing is like, I know every time that you go to a distillery, they give you, little like wrappers, like add some water in here.
Yeah.
But not every distillery necessarily has the same mash build across the board and just gives you different proofs.
Right.
There'll be like different blends at different proofs. And we just kind of give like that whole depiction of like, we add the water for you, or you can add it with the cask proof however you want. You want a 98 proof? You can make a 98 proof. Use a little dropper. That's fine. Or you just drink it straight because like that's how we want you to drink it out of the bottle.
This one is the Roundstone Rye cask proof. Is that one also a one-time release, or is that
year round? The 80, the 92, and the cask are all year round.
I was trying to find the cask proof and I couldn't find it.
Not every liquor store necessarily carries it because it's, depending on like your whiskey drinker, it's kind of like a treat yourself.
Yeah.
Whiskey,
it's a higher MSRP. It's a little bit higher price point. But
FYI, at the same time, it'll last a lot longer.
True. Because it's
so if you're a whiskey person, you can add like a little water to it and just like make it last as long as you want to make it last.
Yeah. So I'm gonna try to get a couple liquor stores. I actually discovered. I don't want to say I discovered. I recently went into a liquor store, and I'm not gonna tell anybody where it is because it's my honey hole now. I don't want to tell anybody about it, but I do at the same time. I will tell people it is in. Well, it's called Liquor and Wine, but I'm not going to tell anybody where it's at. I will tell you that in 2 weeks we're going to be talking with a person who operates a brewery right next door to it. So I want to talk to them and see if because I did notice that this place that I'm talking about carried Catoctin Creek, but I didn't see the cask proof. So FYI, people out there, if you do find something that you really like, but you can't find it at a liquor store, you can talk to the liquor store and see if they can carry it for you.
I tell people that all the time. I'm like, especially after being a rep, like I learned this and I'm like, it's old hat. Just like ask them.
Yeah.
As long as it's a good liquor store. I've been to bad ones. They're like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to get good.
All you have to do is request it. And they'll usually bring it in for you. We're coming up on the hour. I actually have one more question, and you already kind of touched on it a little bit. There's usually one question I don't send to the interviewee so that there can be a little bit of a moment of surprise. The TTB recently posted something new and interesting from Catoctin Creek on their website. A new release, whiskey. What can you tell us about Finch and Hawk malt whiskey?
That's literally all I can tell you is what I told you before. That it's going to be like an all, like I asked
nothing out of her.
What can you give me? So yeah, it's the all Virginia malt whiskey that literally they're getting all the malt out of Virginia, and it's going to be launched in 2021. He won't even give me that information. Like it's like lock and key. Like nope, like I trust you, Avalon, but can't.
I'll
when you're releasing a movie and you're like,
once a month.
So Ben Affleck, like what's happening with the new Daredevil? Nothing.
Nothing because.
But yeah, that's all I got.
I noticed it was posted, and for those of you who have ever tried to navigate through the TTB website, it is impossible. It's virtually impossible. They really, really make it hard to find new labels. But there is a Instagram account there's an account on Instagram called Coming Whiskey that lists all that stuff. So that's where I got it.
The new like.
Okay. He posts all the new labels. So I was like, he posted it, and I saw it, and I was like, perfect timing.
I got to see the City label today, and it looks beautiful.
The who is it? Haymarket down in Kentucky, Louisville. Haymarket Whiskey Bar just recently is soon going to be coming out with their own whiskey, and the label is absolutely beautiful. Real quick about labeling in whiskey and in beer is something that always interested me. I talked with I talked with Spirits of French Lick a couple weeks ago. Who the label on this is? I know you guys won't be able to see it in the podcast that we post, but you guys can see it here on the live cast. Who comes up with the labels for these bottles? Because they're kind of eye-catching.
So we have a person. I want to say her name is Lisa. I've never met her, and I want to say she has designed all of our labels across the board, including the newer ones. I just don't. Scott literally mentioned her name today when I was like talking about this, and he's like, "Oh yeah, the new label. I think her name is Lisa. Lisa, if you're listening, I think that's her name, but it's a female, which is amazing because we are a female, very much so empowered distillery. If I didn't mention before, primarily female in the distillery. Like there's like maybe 5 women to every man, and that's like 15 people. So,
and a very predominant woman in the whiskey industry in general, not just the craft industry, but just the distilling world, really in general. So, hats off to Becky, and hats off obviously to everybody at Catoctin Creek for everything you guys do.
Yeah, somebody local that they know.
I mean, it definitely sticks out on a shelf. Not only that, but the name too. It really sticks out on a shelf. I have to recommend, anytime we talk to a distillery or a brewery, I highly recommend you guys try Catoctin Creek, especially those bourbon drinkers out there who maybe want to make your way into the rye world or not really sure what to try.
A little bit of spice, not too much spice. Just
little bit of spice, but it's more sweet than anything. I definitely recommend Catoctin Creek. I had the 92 proof. I got it at Benny's.
Benny's most awarded whiskey. That's the one that like hits people across the board.
Yeah.
Bourbon.
And this is and it's got a neck tag on it, the 2015 gold medal winner at the New York World Wine and Spirits Competition. You can open up and learn a little bit more about it. You can find Benny's at Catoctin Creek at Benny's. You can also ask for it at your local liquor store if they don't have it. I want to thank Avalon for joining us tonight and spending an hour with us to chat about Catoctin Creek. You can find Catoctin Creek at Benny's in the Chicagoland area, online at catoctincreekdistilling.com, on social media at Catoctin Creek, or at the distillery at 120 West Main Street in Purcellville, Virginia. Avalon, do you have anything you want to say before we log off and enjoy a glass of rye?
No, I just appreciate you like bringing us on here. I was super shocked that you reached out to me about doing it, and I'm happy to be here. If you ever need me to come back to talk about meatballs and whiskey, I'm more than happy to.
Maybe we'll do a meatball episode.
Do it.
Done deal. Sign me up. I want to thank everyone who tuned in tonight and listens each week. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe on YouTube for new interviews each week with craft distilleries and microbreweries. You can help us expand by becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/theglasslesstraveled and by following us on Facebook and Instagram. And you can now listen to us via podcast. This episode will be available as a podcast in about an hour. So whatever you use to listen to podcasts, you can take us with you on the go. We will be back next Monday, the 20th at 7 p.m. with my good buddy Dan Greyson, who we talked with a little bit tonight, doing a live back-to-back with some fan favorites like Blanton's Elijah Craig 4 Roses and 1792. We have a great episode next Wednesday with a craft brewery from Vietnam, of all places. I know, go figure, right? And we'll be talking with 93 Octane Brewery in St. Charles in a couple of weeks, if that didn't give away for those of you Fox Valleyans what liquor store I was talking about. That's in my new honey hole. Everybody, I'm going to refill my glass. Avalon, if you want to stay on a couple more minutes and chat a little bit. Everyone else, cheers.
Cheers.
And we will see you guys next week.